Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 83, Wishing for More. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the movie Wish. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Glad to hear that. I'm doing good. Thank you. And what's
Excellent.
new in your writing world?
Writing world, still working on edits for Zara 2 and continuing to upload episodes to Kindle Vella. So those things are in progress.
How many episodes do you have on Vella so far?
I think 9 or 10.
Awesome.
Something like that.
So that's enough for someone to sink their teeth into.
Yeah, it's getting going. I continued it from the first story. So I renamed the story on Kindle Vella from The Golden Scarab of Balahar to The Tales of Zara.
Okay.
And so I just added episodes on to the end of that previous story, titled the first episode of it, Season 2, with the name of this book, which will be The Wrath of Sekhmet. So I'll just keep stretching that out. It'll be one long Vella, which is kind of what most people tend to do. They just have like different seasons, they call it.
Yeah.
So that's how I've set it up.
Okay, very good. And my
What's
world
going on
is
in
pretty much
yours?
the
Yeah.
same. It's pretty much the same. I'm doing a lot of plot work, doing a lot of editing, not so much writing, just sort of moving forward. Yeah, about the same.
All right, cool.
So what interesting stories have you come across lately in books, movies, or television?
Ooh, good question. I need to start watching some cool TV show or something. Oh, I watched this movie, an anime movie called Your Name. Have you heard of that?
Okay.
Yeah, the only reason I watched it is because I saw on Brandon Sanderson's sequence that he does with another writer, a friend of his. They were talking about this movie. So I decided to check it out. It's a cool story. The setup is it's in Japan, and this girl and this guy have dreams of the other person's life. And then they start to realize that it's not a dream. They're actually taking over that person's body in their sleep, kind of.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then, you know, they start realizing what's happening. They start sending leaving messages for each other. And there's a lot more to it. I don't want to give away the story in case anyone wants to see it, but it's pretty cool.
Cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Wonderful.
What about you? Have you encountered any cool stories?
Let's see. I actually did watch the second Beetlejuice movie last weekend.
Oh, what did you think?
You know, I liked Beetlejuice, the original movie. And in watching the second movie, I realized what I really enjoyed about Beetlejuice was the story of the Maitlands, because I could relate to them. And Beetlejuice is just gross, right?
Yeah.
What they did with the second movie is sort of double down on the Beetlejuice stuff, which a lot of people really enjoy. He's nuts, right? And he's so over the top, and he's so exaggerated and hyperbolic in everything he does that's part of the pleasure of the story. So if you enjoy the Beetlejuice part, this movie is for you.
All right. Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the first movie they were saying he's only in it for like 12 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, which is a sign of how well he played that role, because he made such a big impression. Yeah. His presence is there the whole time, right? There's the little signs and the little notices and stuff. So you're getting these hints about him. leading up to him, but the actual presence of the character, you're right, it's a very short amount of time. This second movie is a lot more of him. And I think for people who really enjoy that part, they're going to really like this movie. I unfortunately wanted to connect more with the people in the world of the living, and there was less of that. Though what was there was pretty good. I enjoyed the stepmom. She's mellowed out a bit, and so her character was enjoyable. Lydia, the daughter, her daughter, was an interesting new addition. So I think if not in the theater, definitely stream it, rent it. I think it's definitely worth consuming.
All right.
Yeah. And then I also started the Rings of Power. Started watching episodes of that. And I think they have done a better job this season. I think they're a little bit more focused as to what they want to do. So far, I've been like, okay, this makes sense. It's creating suspense, and it seems to be well developed as far as the storyline and the characters, etc., and where they're going to be going this season, and the goals that they're going to be trying to do, and how they're all interwoven with the baddie. So I have a lot of hopes for this one. So far, I think I've seen 3 episodes, and I think they've been good. Are you ready to talk about Wish?
I am.
Today we're talking about the story told in the movie Wish, and I will read the short synopsis that comes up when you type Wish into Google. Young Asha makes a wish so powerful that it's answered by a cosmic force, a little ball of boundless energy called Star. With Star's help, Asha must save her kingdom from King Magnifico and prove that when the will of one courageous human connects with the magic of the stars, wondrous things can happen. Did you like this movie?
I'm very mid on this movie. There are definitely things I liked about it, and there's a lot of things I think could be improved, which we'll talk about in that discussion. But as far as the things I liked, I mean, I like the description that you just said. Like, that sounds like a cool idea. And I think they have a good setup in that sense for the story. And this is obviously meant as a sort of love letter to previous Disney movies, right? There's a lot of love for the previous stories in here. There's so many nods and references to the other stories, with Wishing Upon a Star, with the Wendy character who wants to fly, and the Peter Pan character, and Neverland, and Mary Poppins, and Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, and Bambi, and Zootopia, all these things, right? There's tons of these references in the story, which I thought was cool. I thought that was a lot of fun. And I think, all right, again, we'll get to what can be improved. I think the setup was interesting. There, oftentimes in a story, most of the time in a story, the protagonist or the world is in some type of distressed state at the start of the story, right? In this case, it's very subtle, because the protagonist is even singing about how wonderful everything is and what a great place this is. And then we slowly start to see cracks in this ideal world over time. And obviously, as the story progresses, we see more and more of that. And then, we get into the conflict of the story. So I kind of like that it starts off subtly. It's kind of an interesting way to do it. It eases us into the world. I like that her friends are callbacks to the classic Disney, Seven Dwarfs characters. I thought that was kind of cool. I like that her friends quickly discovered what was going on with the star, rather than dragging that out. And I like that they also quickly jumped on board to help her, for the most part. I like that. I love that Asha stands up for herself from the very beginning and doesn't back down, even to the king. She's a very strong character. She's very agentive, right? She's going to change things. She's got her mind set on it. I think in this story, and this will be interesting, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this. I think she's what I call the stalwart hero in this story. I don't think she really changes much. It's more about her changing the people and the world around her. So that's interesting to see. Usually you get a classic hero story, in particular in Disney, where, the character's overcoming some flaw or some lie that they're telling themselves, and we get to see that change. Whereas here, I think it's more about she's strong with her beliefs and changes what's around her. So I like that take. I liked that the idea for where the villain would go later in the story, I thought was really good. We have this man who is ostensibly protecting these people's dreams/wishes. And then at the end, he's literally crushing them for his own gain. I liked the metaphorical and factual, literal crushing of them. I thought that was a good way to handle that, and visually handling that. I thought that was a neat idea, and it really makes you dislike that guy. And then I have a lot of thoughts about how it could be improved. Yeah. What about you? What aspects of the story? Let's start with what you liked about this story.
Okay, because that was very well phrased. Because if you had said to me, did you like this movie? My answer would have been no. So by asking me the question the way you did, you're forcing me to tell you what I did like, which there was.
You gotta start off positive.
So I thought the opening was really intriguing. I thought this whole setup of the island of Rosas and how Magnifico set it up and the purpose for which he set it up, which was ostensibly supposed to be supportive and a caring and compassionate reason to create this idyllic society. I thought that was really fascinating. I enjoyed the introduction of Asha and her family and her friends. I thought they were all very interesting and unique. I did not pick up the call back to the Seven Dwarfs. And I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. I did not know anything about this movie when I jumped in. So I did not know that this was supposed to be some kind of homage to Disney's history. And so I didn't pick up the Seven Dwarfs thing. I did at the beginning. I was like, this is really like Encanto when she was like singing about how great Rosas was. I was like, I've seen this before. This is in Encanto. But it didn't dawn on me until later what was going on. And by that point, it was irritating rather than, oh, look, it's familiar and reminding me. No, it was just sort of like, you're taking me out of the story. You're taking me out of the story with this stuff. You're taking me out of the story. So, and maybe that was a necessary component to watch the movie, is knowing that this was intended to be an homage, because I didn't. I just turned it on and started watching it. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, good for you for picking up on that stuff, because I didn't.
I picked on some of the things as they went on. I mean, some of it was just really obvious with the Peter Pan and Neverland and Zootopia reference and Bambi. I mean, they have literal characters that they're talking about.
Yeah.
So some of that stuff is very obvious. And then when I look back, I was like, oh, the grandfather's celebrating his 100th birthday, like Disney's celebrating their 100th birthday, at least the animation studios. So it's like, then I realized, okay, all this stuff, it must be intentional. And then later I looked it up online and realized, oh yeah, okay, that's what they're doing.
Yeah. So anyway, those are the things that I really enjoyed about the film. I liked it all the way up to where she defied Magnifico. And then it started to, I don't know, it just sort of felt like it was falling apart to me. But everything up to that point, I thought was really well done. I was enjoying it. I agree. She's a very agentive character. She stood up for herself. She was smart, but still vulnerable. She had a real depth and reality to her, as did Magnifico. And so I thought these were going to be two very interesting, opponents in the story. And then they weren't.
Yeah, I agree. I like that she very quickly saw what was going on with the wishes. Like because in her mind, she had just sung the song about how great everything was, how awesome Magnifico is, how, everything was wonderful around her. And she very quickly realized, wait, this isn't good. Rather than being like blinded by, this love that she had for her. So I like that she was quick to pick up on that. Yeah. And see what no one else saw. I did enjoy that aspect of it.
Or at least not what no one else realized. I don't think everybody realized that, when he admitted that he wasn't going to grant people's wishes for whatever reason, then it was no longer a matter of him holding them safe, as he said he was.
Yeah,
it was a matter of him just holding them.
Yes.
So, and I thought that was a great twist. And I think, and as we talk about what we might have improved, I think it was also a lost opportunity. So are you ready to talk about what we might improve?
Yeah, let's go. Well, to touch on some of the things that I liked and sort of the opposite side of that, right? With all the Disney references, all the references to other Disney movies, I should say. I thought those were cool. There's a lot of fun. It's, oh, they're talking about this, oh, they're talking about that. But it seemed like they were focused more on jamming those things into the story than focusing on making this story good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it ultimately ended up hurting them. It did. They weren't blended in naturally. Yeah. So that's one aspect of it. The music. I can't speak too much to the music and the songs because personally, those things generally don't do much for me anyway. I'm not a huge music person. One thing I will notice for me in this movie, I would have liked to have seen at least one song just be fun. I felt like they were all sort of, I don't know, at least a little serious or messagey, rather than just like having the joy of it. Like you mentioned Encanto, right? The first song of Encanto, it's just fun. The first song in here was like, okay, you're just kind of telling me what's going on. It wasn't particularly fun, at least for me. And all of the songs that were that way for me, none of them really grabbed me. And I think that's one of the problems I had with this overall is there wasn't a lot of fun in this movie. It seemed like there's like this, they were trying to hit these beats and they were trying to get this message out and they're trying to connect all this Disney stuff and they forgot to like make this story fun, have some fun and have some danger and have some excitement.
And have some heart.
Yeah, have some heart. Yeah. Okay, so moving on. I didn't like that Asha's friends supported her almost instantly, but her family didn't. I can understand her family being doubtful about what she was saying, but they seemed outright hostile and wouldn't even hear her out. And I don't understand. That just came from nowhere. I think part of it is because we didn't really get a buildup of those characters. Why they would feel so angry. Like, there was no mention that these people were in fear for their lives from, the horrible dictator, right? It seemed like everything was fun and happy and joy. So there's no reason for them to be fearful or angry that she would feel this way or that she would be presenting them with new information that might change how they think. So I didn't understand that and I didn't like that. It made me really not like her family immediately. I thought that was a big mistake. So I would not have done that. I would have, if following along with the storyline, I would have made them maybe doubtful about her claim, but not outright hostile. I mean, the family dynamic before was she really wanted to see her grandfather get her wish. It was like this selfless thing. She was going to try to be this apprentice. One of the things she was trying to do was thinking about her grandfather. He was getting old. He was 100 years old. Who knows how much more time he had. She wanted for him to have his wish, enacted before the end, basically. And they were mean to her. So I didn't like that. It didn't feel in tone, like keeping in tone with the setup up to that point. And like I said, it made me dislike those characters. Okay. Speaking of her mother, she barely seemed to have a role in this movie. I don't really understand why. It seemed like that would have been a pretty key relationship. I would have shown them having a good relationship beforehand. So we're really mad when her mother's wish gets crushed. Because as it was like, okay, her mother's wish got crushed. Moving on. I didn't really care. I would have shown what's his name? Magnifico? Magnifico's wife, Amaya. His wife, Amaya. I would have shown her expressing concern or doubts about her husband earlier, even if it was just facial expressions, because surely she must have seen aspects of his true nature earlier than she did, earlier than Asha coming in and, kind of upsetting the cart. Because her turn seemed really quick and not fully believable. And I think that's sort of a theme throughout this. Is a lot of these elements just weren't believable to me, and that was one. So I would have shown her having some kind of doubts, giving sideways glances, showing that she knows something is up earlier. I would have had at the end when it was revealed, who Magnifico was, certainly after he became pure evil, I would have shown Asha's grandfather and mother apologizing to her because she was right. And they yelled at her instead of really listening to her. And that was a missed opportunity for some redemption for her character, some redemption for their character, some catharsis for the viewer, some emotion there. Completely blown opportunity. I also think they missed a huge opportunity with her grandfather. He could have had a stand-up and cheer moment in the climax. When she started singing, we could have seen him start playing an instrument and singing along and thus inspiring everyone else to join in. They completely dropped that ball. They set that up as one of the main things. That was his wish. They could have paid that off at that moment instead of just having him sing after the credits. That was an unfortunate decision, I think. I think this is kind of a small thing. Making Asha a fairy godmother at the end felt totally shoehorned in. It seemed completely disconnected to the story, especially since she was so young. It wasn't necessary. I would have removed that. And I think that exemplifies one of the things I mentioned first that could be improved is just all these shoehorning in of these little nods to previous Disney stories. It really takes you out of the story that they're trying to tell immediately.
Yeah.
I thought overall the story and the elements and the turns felt very predictable. Some of that is because, we're here analyzing stories, so I'm thinking about it, as it's going along. And I'm sure many other Disney movies are predictable when I look back on them. But this one, it didn't sweep me up in a fun, exciting adventure that let me forget about trying to predict what was going to come. So I think that was a failing. I think a lot of these elements that I mentioned and that you're probably going to talk about in terms of improving this, improving the pacing, improving the continuity of the story, improving the emotion, will let you forget that it's a little bit predictable. It's okay if it be predictable, if it's a fun, exciting story that you're going along with and you're feeling emotion for. I wanted to care about the heroine, Asha. But since it's not really about her growth, because like I said, I feel like she's a stalwart here. I'm curious to see how you think about that. It's more about her saving the people around her. For much of the movie, those people don't seem that upset about their situation and are even actively working against her. So it makes it harder to root for her in that way. And I would have picked up the tension earlier. I would have made the subtle signs of things not being right more obvious more quickly so we can really root for her and her friends and family. I mean, because as it was, no one really asked her to do what she did. So it made it hard for us to get behind her. I don't know. There's more to say, and there's more wrong here. There's like more that I feel that's wrong that I didn't get to put my finger on. So I'm hoping to hear more notes from you that will help me flesh out reasons that this didn't quite work for me.
It's funny, when you were talking about Asha being a stalwart character, do you know where my mind went? It went to the movie The Island, because this is the exact same story.
Yeah,
they're in an idyllic place with promises of good things to come, but it's really not good. And then somebody figures out it's all bad, but nobody believes him, either on the inside or the outside. I mean, it feels like the exact same story, except it's all wrapped up in Disney animation and music rather than, a dystopian future world. I think you hit on something that is really important towards one of my big takeaways, which was slightly different than one of the things that you mentioned. You talked about how Queen Amaya, was deeply in love with him and supported him and was like his most stalwart supporter, and his whole this whole island, this kingdom, I should say, loved him and supported him, and Asha loved him and supported him. And by having him turn into this evil guy at the end, essentially disrespects every single one of those other characters' perceptions and abilities to see what's going on in the world. And to me, that was the huge lost opportunity here, because At the beginning of this movie, we have this suggestion that Magnifico experienced something traumatic. And I'm not entirely sure, I may have missed the details, but he experienced something traumatic, something so traumatic that he dedicated himself to safeguard wishes so that they would not be destroyed. Which, by the way, is kind of weird in and of itself. Wishes or dreams? I think it should have been dreams instead of wishes, but they wanted to do Wish Upon the Stars, so I guess that's the direction they went. But let's just go with wishes for the time being, to safeguard wishes. So this man experienced some kind of trauma. And I would have loved to have seen this story and Asha help him work through his trauma rather than him just going full two-dimensional evil side. Because then you would have had Amaya's love for him and the kingdom's respect for him validated through his learning something important because of Asha. I think that would have made so much more sense. And I agree. They got Chris Pine to do this role, who is a fantastic actor. He could have pulled that off so easily. Where, he could have gone a little bit evil and we could have, chewing the scenery a bit and having some fun with that. But then have Asha bring it back with the help of Star, because Star is apparently some kind of supernatural being, right, above nature, that had a greater understanding of the human heart and the importance of wishes and dreams, etc. With that, the guidance of that Star, Asha could have helped him learn that lesson. And then we wouldn't have had all these other questions about the family and the friends and the kingdom and the queen, who suddenly just seemed to be so not consistent with the way we were introduced to their characters at the beginning of the story.
I like that. That would have been a much more rewarding conclusion.
Yeah. And plus, I think it would have added... Go ahead.
And he could have... It could have been helping him realize his wish or his dream fully.
Yeah. Wouldn't that have been cool?
Yeah.
I think the other piece of it would have been this. This movie had these references to other Disney stories, peppered throughout, and I agree so wholeheartedly that it just, every time they did it, it took me out of the story. Oh, look what they did there. Oh, look what they did there. Oh, look what they did there. But in addition to, if they also then, with that sort of reframing of Magnifico and having him be the one that learns the lesson, the bad guy learned the lesson, it could have showed you where stories can go in the future, right? So you have this homage to the past, but also this vision of the future of complex storytelling with interesting multidimensional characters that have really interesting stories to tell that are not just two-dimensional white and black, bad, good and evil stories. I think that would have also kind of taken Disney forward, showed us the forward as well as the backward. I don't know. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
The other thing that was really, thank you very much. The other thing that was really frustrating to me was the fact that I didn't understand the rules of this world. What was she doing? What was he doing? What were they trying to do? It was unclear. It was just catch the star. I'm going to have all the power, right? But there was the rules, because I didn't understand the rules, there was no urgency in whatever it is Asha was doing to try to stop him. And I found that kind of frustrating as well. And that's the second time I had the same, concern with the portable door. I didn't understand the framework within which my protagonist was functioning so that I could understand what the urgency was and what the pitfalls were, and then appreciate the overcoming of these challenges.
That's a good note, Rick. What was the urgency? She was going to get her mother's wish back or something like this, and why? You're right. Why did it need to be right then? Couldn't they have taken time to think about this, to plan a heist properly, and something like that?
And he was, I guess, eating all of the wishes, but he also wanted to get the star. It seemed to be such a hodgepodge of things happening that it didn't all make sense, at least to me.
Yeah, no, you're right. But he wasn't even eating the wishes until, much later. She didn't even know that was happening. He was just keeping them there. And another thing I was thinking about afterward was they were going to release these wishes, right? And they had to open the sky, open the ceiling. Like that whole scene. That whole scene didn't make any sense to me. It's like, so the wishes just like float away. Like, wouldn't they have all been pressed up against the ceiling trying to float out? It seemed like they were in stasis in the air where they were.
If he was protecting them, why did he create a building that would let them
exactly? Why is there an opening on this building? If you had shown it as like, this is his tower to view the stars, like is an astronomy room, and he kept them there. Maybe they did that and I don't remember.
No, I don't think so.
And why did they all have to jump off to open the thing? Presumably, if these things float up, they could have just all pulled on one of them and opened one little section, and they could have floated out that section.
Yeah.
The whole scene was weird.
Yeah. So, did you come up with any themes for Wish?
Yeah, I had a few things. Like you said, I saw also a reference to the island. So there's a message of inevitable revolt, right? Exemplify by earlier in the story with the hero and later by everyone in the climax. Ultimately, people are going to revolt when they're held down, even though they didn't really feel like they were held down until Asha stirred up trouble. I think there's also the message of locking your dreams away only leads to sadness. I think.
Oh, I like that.
I think there's a couple of good messages in here, but I think it kind of became muddled. I wish they had focused more. I also had a message of don't just wish about things, actually try to make your dreams reality. We see this with them all waiting to see if the king will grant their wish, right? And then at the end, once they take their fate into their own hands, they start pursuing their dreams. So I'm guessing that's kind of the overall theme of the story. And then from the antagonist's point of view, a lust for power and control will doom you, right? That's what we get from him. And I think you're right. I think it would have been more powerful if Asha could have helped him grow as well and him to fully realize his wish and become more of a part of the community rather than a ruler of the community. I like that better.
Yeah, me too.
But those are the messages / themes that I got. What about you?
I thought those were good. And the only one I would add is for Magnifico, who to me was actually the most dynamic of the characters, which is why I think it was such a lost opportunity that he didn't get a chance to grow. And that is, he, again, like I said, he had some trauma that drove him to do this. And so I pulled from that, don't let fear drive your actions.
Yeah, that's a good one. Again, I wish we had gotten more of that from him early on and then seen that later. But yeah, I like that a lot.
So what's your takeaway?
Let's see. I think for me, having a villain or an antagonist that crushes the dreams of the hero is really powerful. It doesn't have to be literal, like in this case, but I think that really makes you root against that character. So I think that's a great way that you can set up your antagonist, because the antagonist is literally opposing the hero's goals, right? And if the antagonist also plays a part in crushing that hero's dreams, I think that's even more powerful. So that's my writing takeaway. What do you got?
Because this was such a hodgepodge of story ideas that I don't think were well fleshed out, I kind of felt like it was rehashing old story ideas like we've talked about before. And that felt, I think that they were trying to connect with the viewers, the audience, with these familiar concepts, but instead it didn't feel well thought out and careful. And so it felt a little disrespectful of the audience. So my note was, be respectful of your audience. I think it's okay to reuse tropes and concepts because people enjoy the same kinds of stories. What they enjoy is, however, is seeing those similar stories told in new and fresh ways. And so that's my takeaway. Be respectful of your audience. Go ahead and give them similar story types, but do it in a new and as fresh way as possible.
Yeah, I like that. I had another thought I wanted to discuss if you have a moment here.
Yeah.
One of the things is they sort of touch on all these other Disney characters and elements, right? There's this Peter Pan-ish character. There's a Bambi character. There's all these other things, right? Sort of Sleeping Beauty and Snow White and all these other references. But in my mind, like a lot of those other Disney movies, they take place in kind of this other world, this other realm, this other magical place, not necessarily here on Earth. Although some of them certainly could and do. But this one is clearly like they say it's like in the Mediterranean, right?
Yeah.
So it's very like, okay, this was here, but then you're referencing all those other things. I don't know. It felt like a weird choice to make when there was no reason to necessarily specifically set it in a specific location on this planet. That seemed like an odd choice to me.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. I think that's a really good point. It's sort of crossing all the different story universes. And you're right, because I think even subconsciously, once we learn it's on Earth, we're grounded in earthly things. And then to pull these, well, I don't know, like Bambi takes place on Earth. Snow White takes place on Earth. Pinocchio takes place on Earth.
Yeah, some of them.
They're
some
fantastical.
Of them
yeah, but you're right. Zootopia doesn't.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a mix.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was yeah, again, it sort of it added to that hodgepodge feel.
Yeah. Another thing I just thought of was the book. I don't know.
Oh.
Like the background of this book. It's like, why does he have this evil book sitting there tempting him to perform magic that's going to turn him permanently evil, which he knows when he reads it? Why is that there?
Yeah.
That whole thing just seemed very contrived to me.
Yeah.
And unnecessary. It wasn't needed. Especially if it had gone like the way you said, where ultimately he's redeemed at the end. You wouldn't have needed that whole contrivance.
Thank you for joining us as we talked about the story told in the movie Wish. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters and all our subscribers. We're so grateful for your support and your encouragement. The Stories Told podcast is available on multiple podcast platforms, and we thank you for liking and subscribing or following, depending on where you're listening. It may not be a big deal to you, but it means a lot to us. If you have a favorite book, movie, or TV series you'd like to suggest for the podcast, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, and that link is in the show notes. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and E.W. Barnes at 1000years.com, and those links are also in the show notes. Join us next time as we discuss the story told in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.